Well, 21st century republicanism has obviously been shaped by what's gone before, and it has to be shaped by the present world and all that derives from that. Some of this stuff is, as Brian says, is going to be familiar because it's been touched on by all the previous speakers. But we're all familiar with the beginning of Tone and the United Irishmen and the tradition of separatism that went from the Fenians, the Volunteers, the Citizen Army, right up to the War of Independence. And then with the treaty, the counter-revolution basically pushed republicanism into isolation. And one was, the first one I'd say was the definition of the nation. That the nation was not only territory, but in fact included the resources that belonged to that territory. The second point, again it's been emphasised, that power derives from the people themselves. The notion of democracy, and just Pearce's quote, make no mistake who will be Lord and Master, the people will be Lord and Master. And we're also familiar with Connolly's "We cannot conceive of a free Ireland with a subject working class," all of which derived in some way from Tone's "The Common Name." The definition of Irish man, woman, was of course Catholic, Protestant and dissenter. So by its very nature, republicanism was anti-imperialist. That was its ideology. It was socially aware by design, and it believed that the reconquest of Ireland meant to satisfy the needs of the Irish people. That was its rationale, and it had the power, and still remains the power, to attract the physical force tradition and the secret society tradition by advanced separatists. These have often survived beyond their sell-by date. In today's conditions, their outcomes, limitations and successes should only be a matter of historical discourse. However, seeking to achieve these democratic objectives was much more problematic. After all, one can write slogans and put out programs, because every generation produced forms and struggle that were influenced by a whole set of social, political, cultural limitations and constraints. Republicans were very often a minority in public life, as they viewed it nationalists, home rulers, advocates of dual monarchy, and of course empire loyalists. And I'm slightly unhappy with the optimism that Owen and Brian have given, as if there's a sway towards the change in society is also going to lead to more liberalism and favouritism and new ideas. You only have to look at yesterday's Irish Times of how the ruling class tends to celebrate 1916 and 1913 and the War of Independence. Mr. John Bruton says, no relation but my namesake, John Redmond, was in fact the realist. It was he who was the realist, not the men who went out in 16 War of Independence. Because 1916 was unnecessary. And it's there in plain, this is our media. The only mistake that Redmond made was to estimate that the First World War would only take 1 year. So there'll be only, what, 30 or 40,000 killed, but the bloody thing took 4 years. And that was his mistake. His mistake was of thinking about strategy and past. The concept of a mass movement that was always there and attempted. And when it did succeed, it proved successful. And then the second thing was the arrival of the labour movement on the scene, and when the periods when the common interests of the labour movement and the Republican movement coincided, then you had successes. Examples of those, of course, the mass movement was the 1870s, the great new departure, where the physical force Fenians combined with Dallas Land League, dragging in Parnell's parliamentary party into the new departure. That new departure broke the back of British landlordism in this country and ensured there was no more national famines. And behind all this was a strategy and thinking. In our own day, we've seen the unity of communists and left Republicans in helping to form the civil rights movement, which began the breakup of the hegemony of the Orange State. But what of today and the topic before us? What are the challenges this generation face? I don't want to deal with present crisis, the austerity and to fight back, because I think we would generally, everyone in this room would agree, we need a people's resistance against household taxes, paying the debt, etc. But to raise some other questions which influence our strategy for the coming period. These include the fact that Ireland has changed socially, politically, culturally over the last period, and that these changes are influenced by international factors. Imperialism is not just capitalism. Imperialism is a higher stage of capitalism, dominated by particularly global monopolies in the financial area. So Ireland is no longer just subject to British imperial influences, north and south. We are dominated by global capital, particularly in the form of the need to reform it and to make it more democratic. Now, while as internationalists we will always identify with this in solidarity with struggles across the progressive movement across Europe, but we do need to win an acceptance among people is that the EU is an imperialist institution of powerful monopoly countries, particularly of Germany, France and Britain. And this imperial bloc undermines our independence and sovereignty. And while it's not as easy to identify as an army of occupation, it's more deadly and harder to uproot. And I think we've really got to take that onto our agenda and think about it. Because failure to understand the EU spreads illusions about it being a benign force, capable of reform. And I suggest that no section of the left should go down that road. It's a slippery path that ends to the disgraceful behaviour such as PASOK in Greece, the Social Democrats, their friends in the Spanish, Portuguese parties, and not forgetting, coming rapidly behind them, our friends in the Irish Labour Party and some sections of ICE. The new features of this capitalist domination, dominate our policies because they have always been, the politics of the elite in North and South, who have always relied on foreign investment and multinational domination. These factors raise those strategic political questions for us. Will there be a new settlement of an all-Ireland nature? If so, which parties would favour that type of settlement? It would be a settlement in favour of capital and their institutions. I mean, the Labour Party generally here has been bought and sold, and is there life, as Brian says, in the old dog of Fianna Fáil yet? And then even in the north, new thinking has to emerge because power sharing has to run its course at some stage. So we've got to have a look at it, Grant. I'm going to cut it slightly short because Tommy mentioned it. Within that whole debate about institutions, accommodations, the Protestant section of the working class in the north, in North East Ireland, has to be taken into account in any evaluations, in any strategies. These are no easy questions, and we need, I think, to return back to them to promote a left alternative in the coming decade. I want to end on the dynamics of struggle. How, in fact, do we take advantage of change in Ireland, change in scene, opportunities? What are the key ingredients for that dynamic? And I'd say the first is clarity of theory, right? Theory, which does mean we've got to study economic situation. We've got to study the nature of a state, by the way. And a state and state power is nothing to do with winning elections. We've got to study how the state operates, the state apparatus, and who the state serves and in whose interest it functions. That's theoretical work that needs to be done and taught and read. And we should do no harm than update Connolly's Marxism. We have to create popular, sustainable campaigns based on people's experience of hardship and avoid over-reliance on electoralism and populism and what I call here the politics of the last repetitive demo. I think you know what I mean by that, marching up the hill and back down again. The third point, we must regain and renew the labour movement, in particular the trade unions, for a militant, class-conscious fight on immediate issues, but linking those intermediate issues to the function of that we're in a crisis of the capitalist system itself. And I'd say the social forces are there to do all that. They're workers, people involved in communities on the land, in fisheries, the thinking youth, the unemployed, family businesses. There's a whole, they are the majority. They're the majority of the population. That's the basis on which the dynamic of struggle should be based. And it needs, if you like, the polish of what you've been hearing today and what's in this room to infuse that and translate that into modern terms. And to do that, we question, I'll return to the point, we question the idea that O'Donnell and McCalvey and Mellors did, and say, what are the forces inside our republic can be made relevant to the conditions of working class people? And in the main, they are the Republican movement. It was Engels who said, in the struggles of today, we present the future. In our struggles, no matter how small, we present the future. And that future is, of course, the Socialist United Ireland Republic. Good night.